throw. One-on-one, Davis has it. Touchdown! Carolina wins! Carolina is the Coastal Division champion! Javonte Williams to the left of Howell. He'll send him out into the flat right side. Howell looking, standing tall, lets it go, man there! Touchdown! Touchdown, Carolina! The pistol, Jackson behind him. Hands off to Jackson, he tried a jump pass, and it's intercepted! Surratt intercepts it! Holy cow, Carolina's gonna win! And off to Javonte Williams again, pops it to the left. Javonte leaps over a man, crosses the 50, trucks over a defender, spins by another. Goodness gracious, he's down to about the 15, and he did absolutely everything in one carry.
Here's the shotgun snap to Aguilar. Drops back, pressure coming, Aguilar floats it up, incomplete! No flags! Head on back up the mountain! Carolina wins it in double overtime! Loftus, out of the shotgun, throws to the end zone, incomplete! Incomplete! The bell belongs to us! Carolina wins it! 47-45 in double overtime!
Bernard fields it at the 26. Heading to the far side. Gio at the 35. Gio, he's at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Gio is going to take it for a touchdown. Are you kidding me?
What's going on, guys? Welcome into another edition of the Heel Tough Blog Podcast. It's your host, Anthony Pagnotta, with you guys. As always, coming at you here on a Monday night, getting the week started, a week that will be packed with position previews for the Tar Heels 2025 roster for this year as we get closer and closer to that first game against TCU. We get closer and closer to the start of camp for Carolina, and one of the positions that is going to be talked about a lot is going to be the running back room, and that's what we're going to be breaking down for you here tonight. We'll go in depth, look at the room, talk a little bit about all of the guys that we think are going to factor in this year. There are many different options for Carolina in the backfield this year, including a host of true freshmen that we will touch on a little bit, not as much as some of the other guys in that room, but certainly plenty of options for Carolina in that backfield in their first year under Natrone Means, who has taken over as the running back room coach. So gonna break that down for you in depth. Also wanted to tell you about a target that is going to announce his commitment for Carolina along the defensive line, and one that has already announced his commitment along the defensive line. We'll tell you that at the end of this edition of the podcast, that in the 2026 recruiting class, if you guys are trying to keep up with that. But as I mentioned, let's start with the running backs. And, you know, the biggest thing when it comes to this position group that most people are going to be talking about going into the season is the fact that there is going to be drop off at this position. And when you have a guy that is as good as Omarion Hampton is, it's almost impossible for there not to be some drop off from the type of production that we saw from him last season. Really, the last 2 years were just outstanding for Omarion Hampton. And, I mean, you talk about the legacy of where he's going to rank all time amongst running backs. I mean, he's probably the best running back that Carolina has had in the 2000s, since the turn of the century. And that really is saying something. I think it's either him or Gio. Both guys, of course, had their moments at Carolina. But, I mean, you look at the last 2 years for Omarion Hampton, 253 carries for 1,504 yards and 15 touchdowns back in 2023. Last year, 281 carries, 1,666 yards and 15 touchdowns. That just an unbelievable career for him. I mean, in his career, he finishes with 3,565 rushing yards, 36 rushing touchdowns for Carolina, averaged 5.7 yards per carry, and was also a dynamic receiver, catching 73 passes out of the backfield for 635 yards and 4 touchdowns. there's a lot of different elements that we're going to miss from him. So, I mean, look, there's going to be some drop-off in this room. There's no doubt about that. But I think the question that everybody's sort of wondering here is I welcome in Josh Marlowe, who's with me for this edition of the podcast, as he is for all of the preview editions of the podcast. What do we expect drop-off wise from the from this group this year, as opposed to what we got from Amari and Hampton last year? I think there's going to be some drop-off, but I don't think it's going to be as steep as maybe some people believe.
Yeah, I think the drop-off could be from you going from an All-American quality running back, maybe the best running back in college football the past couple years, to maybe you have an All-ACC running back, and Davion Gause being a guy in the backfield that I do think is poised to be a breakout star. I think the biggest difference with where Carolina's running back room is this year compared to the last 2 years is, I think, especially early on, it's going to be more by committee. It's going to be a rotation of guys that are getting, the carries. And I think we expect the offense to be a little bit more run heavy, a little bit more, I guess, conservative, if you will, in the early going as Gio Lopez adapts to playing at the Power 5 level. The biggest difference is I don't know if there's a running back in the room today that stands out that could take over the game and be the best player on the football field. And Carolina had that the past couple of years in Amari and Hampton. But sometimes less is more. Sometimes you see a room that loses a bona fide stud but has to go to the committee approach, but they get just as much, if not better, production because now you're using different backs with different skill sets that give the offense a different identity. And so I think this is a room that as much as any position group on the offensive side of the football, I think we'll be excited to see what they look like. We'll be interested to hear what Bill Belichick lets us know about how they look in camp. I think it's cool. You've got Natron Means on the sidelines. I think that'll be a fun storyline to follow for this season as well. So while on the onset, it's easy to maybe look at Carolina and how you're going to face Amari and Hampton or how you're going to replace Amari and Hampton. But I think what you can credit Mac Brown with the way he recruited and then what happened once Bill Belichick got into Chapel Hill, there's not a shortage of talent or depth in this room. They've got the pieces that can adequately replace Amari and Hampton. It's just about them all coming together, and I think you'll see a bunch of different guys tote the rock at different points this year for Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, it could be that by committee approach. It'll be interesting to see what they do. I think that Davion Gause is really the lead back in this room, and I think he's going to be the guy that you're expecting to come out and really carry the water for this team. I think there are some other guys that are going to have to be involved. There's no doubt about that. You would like to see a guy like Caleb Hood stay healthy, and we'll get to him here in just a minute. But, I mean, Davion Gause, I mean, you look at him last year, ran for 326 yards and 4 touchdowns on 67 carries, caught 4 passes for 45 yards. What was weird was in the bowl game wasn't really used all that much. Carolina really strayed away from using him, only 5 carries for 12 yards in that bowl game. But that bowl game was just such a disaster that I think it was basically a throwaway. The thing to me that really stood out about him was when Carolina lost Amari and Hampton early in the game against Charlotte, really in 3 quarters, Davion Gause ran for 105 yards, a touchdown on 16 carries. I think this is a guy that is more than capable of leading this room, more than capable of putting the team on his back. Do I think that he is going to be what Amari and Hampton was in his time at Carolina? Certainly, I do not think that. You're talking about a guy in Amari and Hampton that we were having conversations about. If Carolina did enough win-wise, would he be a guy that could be a Heisman Trophy type running back because of the numbers that he was putting up for Carolina? I don't think we're going to be talking about that at all when it comes to Davion Gause. But I do think that he has a chance to be a really, really solid player. I do think that he has a chance to be an all-ACC caliber runner. And, when I went back and watched him, I think the thing that stands out about him is, he runs with a nice edge. I do think there is a little bit of physicality to his game. I don't think he's going to be super bothered by the contact. There were a couple of runs, specifically in the game against Virginia, where he just runs right through a guy. That's certainly an element of his game that is there. It's not nearly as frequent as you saw from Omarion Hampton, but I do think that he's got that. My thing with him is very, very patient running back, very decisive. And when he ends up hitting the hole, he has some really nice bursts. I mean, this is a guy that when he finds where he wants to run, he is able to get up the field very quickly. So I do think it'll be a little bit different. Still a guy that I think is going to be able to have success in those A and B gaps where Omarion Hampton did because of how well he was able to get downhill. But I think he's going to be a guy that's able to really run just about anywhere on the field, get to the point that we saw with Hampton, maybe just not at the same level of explosiveness that we saw from him, although he did end up hurdling a guy last year, so you never really know. I just think it'll basically be, in my opinion, a little Omarion Hampton light with Davion Gause.
Yeah, I think he's going to be, he's going to be a patient runner who's going to want to set up his blocks. But when he finds that hole, when he finds a seam in the defense, he's not going to be afraid to, burst through it. I don't think he's going to be a guy that shies away from contact either. And so the Carolina run game might have a different approach. It might have a different feel because it's not just going to be pounding Omarion up the middle because he was so damn physical. He was able to wear opponents down. Might be a little bit more kind of what you saw. Michael Carter was a very patient runner, the guy that could kind of sit back there, wait for the hole to develop, but once that hole developed, be able to exploit that. But was also physical enough to break tackles and turn 4-yard runs into 6-yard runs, 6-yard runs into 8-yard runs, so on and so forth. And so I think he's a guy that obviously Carolina fans know about him. If you talk to people that know ACC football, they may know about him, but I think this will be a guy, considering we expect Carolina to be playing in national TV windows almost virtually every week. ESPN is banking on Carolina being good enough to put them in big windows. I think this will be a guy that the country will learn about and really see the talent that he possesses, the skill that he possesses, and will be, as I mentioned from the very first comment I made, not just a breakout star for Carolina, not just a breakout star in the ACC, but I think could be a breakout star across the country as well. And so, I think you really got to tip your cap to how this running back room, really since Mack Brown got back to Carolina in 2019, they've been able to replace great running backs. You had Javonte Williams, Michael Carter, that went straight into Omarion Hampton. Now Davion Gause is the next guy that I think is primed and ready to be a 1,000-yard back that's going to be productive for Carolina. And I think for the first month of the season could be the focal point of what they try to do offensively.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I'm going to be really interested in is, do they lean on the run game early in the season? I know that, Gause is a guy that they have never really had to lean on. I mean, they did a little bit in that game against Charlotte. Remember, they were really still compromised at the quarterback position in that game against the 49ers because Connor Harrell really wasn't doing a whole lot. I mean, he wasn't horrible in that game, but he certainly wasn't a guy that was coming out there driving Carolina's offense down the field with ease. I just wonder how much responsibility do they put on him early in the season? And to me, I think he's a guy that's more than capable of handling it. I mean, this is a guy that, you look at how productive he was at the high school level. He was a guy that his school leaned on a lot early on in his career. Now, as it got later on, all of a sudden they discovered, hey, we've got this guy, a wide receiver in Jeremiah Smith, who looks pretty good. He might be the top wide receiver in this recruiting class, and now that might be the top player in all of college football. But still, Davion Gause was a guy that they looked to and used in the run game pretty often. So I think he's a guy that's capable of being that workhorse back. I think it's just, about giving him time, understanding that there will be some bumps in the road potentially for him. Go back to Omarion Hampton. There were bumps in the road for him early on in his career too. And Carolina was able to work through that. He becomes one of the most productive running backs in Carolina history. I think you could see something similar from Davion Gause if Carolina gives him time. I don't know if he's going to put up, again, those numbers that you saw from a guy like Omarion Hampton, but I do think, could you see him more as a guy that produces 1,200 rushing yards at his best? Or maybe this year, it gets to 1,000 yards. That's really what you're looking for, I think, from Davion Gause to sort of carry this running back room. Now, here's the thing, last thing about Davion Gause here. When you look at it, I have this guy as one of my breakout players that we'll talk about. We'll put up an article about them as we get closer to the season. When you look at the breakout players that you have on your list, really there's two that come to mind for me that would be at the top of the list. Is this the guy that you have right at the top of your list, or is he below the other guy that I would think would probably be atop your list?
I guess if you want to go 1A, 1B with Jordan Shipp, they're right there in the same category. Because, and we can have this conversation here really quickly, does Gio Lopez consider a breakout player because he's a transfer coming from the group of 5 level? Because I told you what I think Gio Lopez is capable of doing. If he does what I think, if he puts up 3,500 yards and 30 total touchdowns, I think he would most certainly qualify as a breakout guy. But two guys that I guess you could say were on the roster a year ago that I'm expecting more this upcoming year, I think Jordan Shipp is going to I think he will garner all ACC attention once we get to the end of the season. And I think the same thing about Davion Gause. I think there'll be guys that when we're voting at the end of the year, these will be guys that will be getting some recognition. And if I remember correctly, because I filled my ballot out last night, he was not on the preseason stuff. So if he's there at the end of the year, that would most certainly qualify as a breakout guy. Because I think Jordan Shipp is capable of being an 800-plus yard receiver with anywhere from 6 to 8 touchdowns. And I think Davion Gause is capable of putting up, I would say at a minimum, I think he cracks the 1,000-yard threshold. I was kind of thinking in my head, how sexy do I want to get? Do I want to go 12, 13, 1,400 yards? I don't know if I want to get that dangerous sitting here before we get to training camp, but I do think there's going to be a lot of production there. And so whenever we do our breakout stuff, him and Jordan Shipp will be right there at the top of the list for me.
Yeah, that's who I got atop the list as well. I think those are the two guys that you would probably debate the most because I do think that Davion Gause probably feels like the safest of that group because we've seen what he's been able to do. Jordan Shipp, we got some flashes from him, but we didn't really see that one game where he was really able to take over, not like we saw from Davion Gause. So I would say that Davion Gause is the guy that I would go with as the safer of the two to have a breakout season, but I think both guys are destined for big years. I think, and maybe this ends up making my bold predictions, I think that Davion Gause runs for 1,000 yards. I think that's one that's going to be up there because I really like his run style. I think that he was a guy that really just needed to land in the right system at the college level to be able to have success because people were questioning whether or not the production at the high school level was legit. Why did it drop off? I think he's in a system that's going to use him pretty heavily and it's going to allow him to be successful. So I think Davion Gause, very safe breakout player if you're looking for one of those guys for this upcoming season. And when it comes to Gio Lopez, I would say, yeah, you could put him on there as a breakout player. The thing for me is I don't think he's nearly as safe of a bet as guys like Gause or Jordan Shipp. I think both of those guys are probably safer bets just because you do have that jump from the group of 6 to the Power 4 conference for Gio Lopez. I'll be interested to see how he navigates that. We move on to the battle for the backup running back position. One that I don't really think is that much of a battle, but I do think that there are some people that look at it and say that there is a battle for this spot. To me, if Caleb Hood is healthy, that's going to be your guy. I mean, 471 yards, 2 touchdowns on 98 carries, caught 18 passes for 165 yards and a touchdown so far in 26 games in his career. The biggest thing for him is just he's got to be able to stay on the field, man. Every time that we get excited about what Caleb Hood shows us, every time that we think that he's going to be a part of that running back rotation, he seems to get injured. But this is a great opportunity for him because as the backup in this system. I think, look, last year they were able to run Amarian Hampton basically into the ground. He was a guy that never had to come off the field. With Davion Gause, it's still early in his career. You're not going to want to do that to him. So there are going to be moments where you're going to need your backup running back to step up and play key snaps for you. And God forbid there's an injury, you need someone you can count on. I feel like Caleb Hood is a guy that with what we've seen from him so far in his career, we feel like we can trust him. It's just he's got to be out there on the field if he's going to make the sort of impact that he did, in a game like the App State game back in 2022, where he ripped off a massive carry, was really a big difference in that win for Carolina. Those are the types of moments that are possible for him, but it's all about health.
Yeah, first thing I think about Caleb Hood and being back it feels like he's been a part of this program forever now. Doesn't he feel like a prototypical Bill Belichick back, where I think Belichick is like, he's going to love this dude, right? Because the thing you can say about Caleb Hood, who maybe hasn't had the type of career he envisioned having when he arrived on campus, and injuries played a big part in that, it doesn't matter what he's asked to do, he does it. Because he's a team guy with his connection to the university from his father. He's a Carolina guy. This is a Carolina football player through and through. And so I think more than anything, just from a culture fit for what Bill Belichick is wanting to establish in year one, I think he's really going to love what Caleb Hood can provide, because there's a leadership quality that brings to the field. But also, this is a guy that whenever his body allows him to be on the field, there's production there. And he's a guy that if you got to turn to him in a big moment and hand him the football, he can make a play. He's a guy that can come out of the backfield and maybe catch a pass, or stay in there in pass protection and make a block, or we've seen him make plays on special teams. And so I just hope for him. I would love for him to secure himself as a backup that has some sort of a role, because I think he's just earned it with all the crap his body's been through, and at different times where we got really excited about him being a potential big part of that running back room, and it never worked out. I think it'd be a neat story if this year he could be the number 2 back to Davion Gause, but it has a role. Maybe he's the third down back, no matter what that role looks like, and plays a big part of the foundation that Bill Belichick is going to set. So I'm really hopeful that this is the year that his body holds up, because I think there's a better football player there than what we've been able to see during his time in Chapel Hill. But I know no matter what, that this will be a guy that'll earn the trust and respect of his teammates, because no matter what he's asked to do, he does it, and every team needs a guy like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is that I think he's a guy that whenever he's gotten his opportunities, he's made the most of it. And I think, he fits exactly what Belichick is looking for. I mean, this is a guy that has been through so many injuries, but he's fought through it. He decides to stick it out at Carolina. This is going to be someone that is going to get playing time if he is available. When I watched him, I thought, again, really patient runner, makes smart reads, especially for a guy that played quarterback at the high school level and converted to running back. And he's been really successful there. But I think he does a really good job of getting north-south. I think you saw a little bit more physicality to his game as the years went along. I thought in the bowl game, you saw a little bit of that. And that was when Carolina's offense was most successful in the bowl game, was when they were getting the football in his hands. So this is a guy that's capable of carrying this offense a little bit at times. I think if he is your guy that you're able to throw in there, from time to time when Davion Gause needs a little bit of a breather, I think, he could be a guy that factors in as a pass catching type of guy out of the backfield. I don't think that Davion Gause is a guy that can't catch the ball out of the backfield. I think that is an element of his game, but that's a way that you can get Caleb Hood on the field, is as a guy that, maybe gets out there in pass protection. He's been in the system a long time, as opposed to Davion Gause, who's only been there. This will be his second year in the system. For him, he maybe isn't nearly as polished as Caleb Hood will be as a pass protector. Get him out there as a pass protector, but also a guy that can catch the ball and do stuff with the football in his hands. I really like the potential here for Caleb Hood. And it sounds weird saying potential with a guy that's a senior, but he's a guy that I think just hasn't really been able to show it because of all the injuries. I think this could be a big year for him. And I really do think that he is clearly the number 2 running back in this system this year. Now, when it comes to some of the other guys, I think the other guy that a lot of people are looking towards and believing that he is going to be a big part of what Carolina does is the Michigan transfer Benjamin Hall. Received limited reps last year or over the past 2 years with the Michigan Wolverines and turned 44 carries into just 141 yards, which is an average of just 3.2 yards per carry this past year. Carried the ball 29 times for just 72 yards. And when I heard that, that was the thing that scares me the most about him and what makes me wonder just how big of a factor he's actually going to be, because you're running behind a Michigan offensive line, one of the better offensive line units in the entire country. And I get it. Some of these guys were backups that you were running behind because you weren't playing with the first unit. Even still, if you're not able to run behind that offensive line, what makes you think that you're going to be able to successfully run behind Carolina's offensive line, which I think is a little bit more of a question mark than Michigan's? I don't think that's crazy to say. So I wonder, is he just a guy that was in the wrong system? It was the wrong fit for him in Ann Arbor? Or is this a guy that maybe won't be as productive as some people think he's going to be coming in here this year out of the transfer portal?
I think you got to bank on him being in a much more open offense as opposed to, and I know Michigan does incorporate, I guess, some modern offensive principles into what they do offensively, but that's still about as pro style as an offense that you're going to face or that you're going to be in. And you're also playing in a league where like every defense in the Big Ten, and I know it's cliche, but they all pride themselves on stopping the run. The ACC, like you have good defenses, and you'll see teams like Clemson, Duke, and others that'll be able to stop the run. But I think it's a different game in the Big Ten as opposed to what you see here at the ACC level. You don't end up playing running back at Michigan by accident. There's got to be something there that allows you to be recruited by obviously Jim Harbaugh. And of course, I know he's moved on to the NFL, but you don't end up in there but by accident. So hopefully change of scenery, change of offensive philosophy. He's going to be playing with a better quarterback than what he endured last year with Michigan as well. I think all that is going to be to the benefit to him, to where I think we'll get a much more firm evaluation of him at Carolina as opposed to what you saw with his limited action with the Wolverines the past couple of years. So maybe that's just me being the eternal optimist and making a bunch of excuses for a kid. We watched a lot of Michigan games last year, and you could tell that wasn't the same Michigan offense the year before that won a national championship. And yeah, that offensive line might be better than Carolina's, but it's not like it was an all-time offensive line either. So be interested to see kind of what this guy has. I can tell you from playing with him on the video game loves him, because he was a great difference maker for me as a third down back. Maybe that's what he could be for Carolina on the actual playing field this year. I'm not going to hold everything against him last year at Michigan when he comes to Carolina, because he's in a different system, a different scheme that I think might be more suited to his offensive capabilities.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to this season, I don't know how involved he's really going to be. I think the top two, as long as Hood stays healthy, will probably be the guys that will take the majority of the carries. This is a guy that you're hoping in years down the line can at least be the guy behind Davion Gause and can be that change of pace guy. Really, when I looked at him, when I went back and watched his high school film, I saw a guy that was an explosive playmaker in high school. I mean, they played him all over the place. They would play him in the slot because he could catch the football, but really he was a shifty player that made a lot of guys miss in the open field. And he had some really nice speed to him, and that never really got to show at Michigan. You bring up a good point that Michigan didn't necessarily have a banner year offensively last year, but you just would have liked to see him do a little bit more. I mean, when you have 29 carries and you only turn it into 2.5 yards per carry, that is a little bit concerning. And that's the reason why I think the door is open for, some of the younger guys to contribute here. That's the thing. Do I think that Benjamin Hall has zero chance of making an impact this year? No. I think the fact that he was recruited to Michigan, as you said, there's a reason why you get recruited to a school like that, especially one that has the running back history that Michigan has. I believe that in the right system, a system that fits him a little bit better, more of a pro style or more of a spread out offense, I think it will be even more spread out than what he had at Michigan. I do think he has a chance to succeed. And you brought up another great point. The quarterback play last year at Michigan was so bad. I mean, we have seen some really bad quarterback play in our time covering, college football and the NFL. I mean, from a Tar Heel perspective, we saw the year with Nathan Elliott at quarterback. No offense to Nate Elliott. I know he's a guy a very nice guy, but the offense never really flowed. Last year was a really, really bad quarterback situation for Michigan. No matter who you threw out there never seemed to be any sort of stable passing offense that was able to help the team move down the field. So it was basically reliant on the running game. Maybe being in a system where you are going to have a quarterback in Gio Lopez that we expect to be able to move the ball consistently, especially as the year goes along, maybe that ends up working out better for him. Now you get to a guy that shined in the spring and I think has a real chance to make an impact this year. I think could beat out Benjamin Hall for that third running back role this year, and that's Davion Gause Jr. This is a guy that comes out of the high school level, played at Jacksonville High School in Jacksonville, North Carolina, and finished his high school career with 5,042 yards and 88 touchdowns on the ground. Also had 263 yards and 5 touchdowns as a receiver. He is, when I watched him in high school, he was exactly the type of running back that we have seen Carolina have for the last few years, whether it was Javonte Williams, at times, you saw it from Ty Chandler, although he was more of a speed merchant than anything. But then with Amari and Hampton, the physicality, that's what Davion Gause Jr. brings to the table. He is a guy that runs downhill, really focuses A and B gap. And, at times, he's a guy that not only embraces contact, but seeks it out and is looking to run over guys in the open field. When he does run it on the edges, I see him as a guy that's very patient, does a good job of hitting his holes, being smart about that. His speed isn't that of some of the other backs that we've seen here in recent memory, but I do think it's something that can certainly get better as he goes along. And I think he did have a little bit of burst to him when he would hit the hole. The biggest concern, I think, is his limitations as a pass catcher and the level of competition that he played at in the eastern part of North Carolina. But that is still a school that has produced talented players before. And I do believe with what he showed in the spring, there is a chance that he is a name that people have to get familiar with here sooner rather than later. If he's as physical as he shows on film and that translates to the college level, it's hard to keep those types of runners off the field, especially for a guy like Bill Belichick, who is going to be screaming physicality on both sides of the ball. That's the mindset that he's going to want to bring to the table, and this is a guy that could potentially do that for him.
He could be a guy that his role gets more increased the longer the season moves along, the more he gets acclimated to playing at the college level, playing in the ACC, and figuring out what his head coach wants from him and what he demands from him. When you have the production that he had at the high school level, I mean, look, you can talk about the level of competition. The numbers he put up are insane. This guy's not going to lack confidence. And as you mentioned, was a guy that kind of did burst onto the scene back in the spring. And so there's already going to be, an extra confidence when he goes into fall camp that, hey, look, I think he's also aware that, behind Davion Gause and maybe Caleb Hood, there's a role there that could be carved out for him. And maybe that role moves or gets bigger the longer the season moves along. I think he's a guy that when you hear Michael Lombardi talk about the physical nature of what they want to be as an offense, how they want to be able to wear teams down with the smash mouth physicality of the run game, I think he fits that to the absolute T. And so is he going to play a lot against TCU? My guess is probably not. But could he be a guy that has a bigger role when we get to the final third of the year? I would not be surprised if he has emerged, because I think with the guy that runs with, the patience, but also just the violent nature, it's hard to keep those dudes off the football field, man. And as you mentioned, if this is a guy that is seeking out contact, is avoiding contact, and is running dudes over, Bill Belichick's going to want that on the football field because he likes that type of guy. And I do think if there's one thing that they want to be more so than anything this year is I think they want to be physical and they want to be disciplined. And I think he fits that to the absolute T. So this is going to be, I think, a player that maybe we monitor on a week-to-week basis to see, how his carries and how his role develops. Kind of like a bench player in basketball that maybe is playing only 8 minutes in November, but by February, March is playing anywhere from 12 to 14 minutes. Is this a guy that is maybe getting a handful of carries in the first third of the year, but by the end of the year is playing, significant snaps in the second half, maybe becomes the guy that spells Davion Gause? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see, but I do think there's a scenario where we're talking about this position group next year. His name we'll be talking about a ton as the future of the running back room in Carolina.
Yeah, I don't doubt it at all, because those types of players that are physical, it doesn't matter what type of system you run. When they are guys that are getting downhill, that are going north-south, and are constantly picking up yards, it's hard to not have those guys out there. And that's the thing, is that there's going to be opportunity here in this room, I think, because I just don't know about the durability of Caleb Hood. And especially as the year goes along, the more hits that he's taking on his body, there might be a game or two where he's not able to play for Carolina. And if he's out of the lineup, it comes down to Benjamin Hall or Damon June Jr. sort of setting the pace with him out as that secondary back. I think that June is a guy that's going to go in there with the mindset that he's ready to battle. He's going to have the advantage of already having been in Freddie Kitchens' system, where Benjamin Hall is coming into a new system at Carolina and is having to fit in after spending the spring with Michigan. So I think this is going to be a really interesting battle. I think, if you're looking for a battle to watch in camp that maybe a lot of people aren't talking about, this is the one right here. Because at some point you are going to need this position, this RB3, to step up and play some significant snaps for you. And I think that there is a really good chance, based off of what we saw in the spring, that will be June as opposed to Benjamin Hall, unless Benjamin Hall comes out and shows that explosive playmaking ability that he showed at high school. That's something that Carolina doesn't necessarily have either, a guy that can be incredibly explosive on the edges. I think Gause is a guy that has good speed out there, but not the type of speed that you see with Benjamin Hall, not the type of ability to make guys miss with just how shifty he is. So I think it's a very interesting battle between two very different backs, and we'll have to see how that plays out. And, when it comes to the rest of the room, you've got a guy that's reclassified in Jalen McGill, another true freshman that I think is just as talented as just about anybody in this room. You go back to when he committed to Carolina, and, this was a guy that was a 4-star prospect in the 2026 class. And we thought, okay, this is certainly somebody that is going to be able to make an impact for Carolina if he's in that 2026 class. But, you look at him, this is as productive of a running back as you can get. This past year as a junior at the high school level, he finished with 1,658 rushing yards and 24 touchdowns on just 163 carries on his way to being named Region 3 3A Offensive Player of the Year. He also caught 22 passes for 79 yards and 7 touchdowns. Prior to that, he spent time at Broome High School in Spartanburg, South Carolina, where he ran for 2,638 yards and 47 touchdowns on 319 carries and caught 17 passes for 176 yards and 2 touchdowns. Basically, incredibly productive running back. He ends up reclassifying. I think it's going to be interesting. I don't think he's going to see the field this year because he's so young, but I do think this sets him up to potentially be a guy that in the future plays a little bit for Carolina. The rest of the room, if you're looking at it running back wise, you've got Jalen Nichols, another true freshman out of the state of Louisiana, JoJo Trope, who was another commitment. I forget where exactly he's from, but another true freshman that was added late in the 2026 or 2025 recruiting class, excuse me. And then Henry Martello, not sure exactly where he's going to play. Originally, when Carolina released the numbers, he was a guy that was listed as a running back. He is now on the roster listed as a defensive end. So we'll throw his name in there as well on the defensive side of the ball. But another late add for Carolina, a guy that basically in years past would have been considered a walk-on, but does have a scholarship because Carolina has the extra scholarships for this season. So the last question that we'll talk about here when it comes to the running backs is, do we think this running back room is really capable of carrying this offense early on in the season? Do we think they're capable of it? And 2, do we think they're even going to have to carry this offense early in the season? From my perspective, I do think that Carolina is going to have their running game carry them a little bit out of the gate. And I think the flashes that we saw last year from Davion Gause, I think hopefully a healthy Caleb Hood, hopefully they don't put too many reps on him in practice. If he's out there available early in the season and Carolina can lean on those 2 guys, I feel pretty confident that Carolina will be able to lean on them and will be able to have some decent success as an offense, at least carry them to some wins early in the year with matchups like Charlotte on the road, Richmond at home, and then UCF on the road. I think those are games where you could lean on your running game early on in the season to hopefully carry you to some victories.
Yeah, I think the answer is yes and yes. I think the room is capable of carrying the offense early because you've got a nice mixture of talent, depth, and experience. And I think when you look at the opener, I don't think Carolina wants to find themselves in a track meet. I think this offense is going to put up points and they're going to put up yards and they're going to be a functioning, productive offense that you see in modern college football. But I do think it's going to be different, where I don't think they're going to be as up-tempo in their nature. I think they're going to be a lot more deliberate to really, give that defense as much as a chance to limit the amount of time spent on the field. And you look at that first matchup with TCU, I think the closer and closer we get to that game, people will realize how good that quarterback is, how explosive that guy is. I think Bill Belichick's maybe going to want to limit how much he's on the field because the more possessions, the more chance for points. And so I think that answer is yes. I think – and there's going to be a growing period for Gio Lopez. There's going to be an adaptation phase for him. As good as I think he's capable of being, this is still a step up in competition. What better way to let him get acclimated than being able to hand the football off 30, 35 times, get, $175, $180 on the ground, and not ask him to stand back there and throw it 40, 45 times and go throw for throw in the opener and, with all the lights on him, or week 5 against Clemson. So I think the passing game will be one that develops as the season moves along. But if Carolina gets off to a fast start, I do think it'll be behind that running game, which I think from the onset will be the focal point of this offense, and then they'll build the passing game off of it.
Yeah, and it should be. And one of the other things is that you got to realize that your quarterback's going to be involved in that running game, heavily involved in that running game with his legs and, how much, he was able to run for last year and the success that he had. You're going to want to use that early in the season. Now, you don't want to use it too much. You don't want your quarterback taking a beating. And I asked him when we were talking at ACC Media Days if he had received any sort of comparisons to Sam Howell. He said yes. And he said part of it was because he's a guy that doesn't necessarily know how to slide. That's something that he's working on in his game. Or not that he doesn't know how to slide, but that he doesn't really choose to slide. He's a guy that loves to try to eke out some of those extra yards by running through a guy. He's got to be smart about that. But I do think that's going to be what settles him into the game against TCU is the ability to run the ball. Yes, it's going to be him running and getting his legs activated, but I think it's also going to be getting guys like Davion Gause, guys like Caleb Hood, maybe even these, a guy like Damon June into the game early on, or Benjamin Hall into the game at some point to help him out. But I do think that they are going to be able to lean on that running game. They're going to have to, because I think that wide receiver room and that tight end room have their own questions that have to be answered. So I do think that will be a big part of what Carolina does early on. And I feel confident in that group. And it really just stems from Gause. I cannot explain to you guys how much I love this kid and how much I think this dude is the next great running back for Carolina. In the line that they've had here recently, again, I don't know if he's going to be what Amarian Hampton is, but I think he has a chance to be a damn good running back. And I think you'll see that in the first game of the season against TCU when Carolina leans on him just a little bit. All right, guys. So that wraps it up our look at the running back room for this season. A couple of recruiting notes here for you guys that will throw your way as we get out of here in the 2026 class. 3-star defensive lineman Tufanua Iana Tana Umo Kayas. He did commit over the weekend to Washington on Saturday. Carolina, that was one of the guys that they were looking at the defensive tackle spot. Interesting to sort of see if Carolina ends up landing a commitment with the guy that's expected to announce this Friday. That would be Viliami Moala. If Carolina is able to land his commitment, you do wonder if the reason why Umo Kayas ended up going to Washington was because Moala was a take for Carolina. Moala, a guy that recently, within the last month, decommitted from Oregon, ended up transferring from the Eugene area where he was playing high school football down to Thompson High School in Alabaster, Alabama. Carolina, of course, has had success in the state of Alabama. So it'll be interesting to monitor his decision on Friday. But Carolina is definitely searching for another defensive lineman in this class. Joseph Pecco is the only other defensive line target that is currently uncommitted for Carolina. But they're looking for that other big body to go along with Trayshawn Ruffin. They've got some smaller guys, some guys that will maybe be able to get after the quarterback out of the defensive tackle spot, a little bit thinner, but they're looking for those guys that can play in that one gap. Maybe the 1 to 3 gap, play in that area of the defensive line. And so they've got to go out and find that guy. I'll be interested to see if Moala is the guy that ends up committing there for Carolina as they continue to push to find that guy. And then another guy to keep an eye on, we told you guys this, I think, on one of the recent editions of the podcast, Devon Benjamin, the 4-star cornerback. He will announce his decision on August 2nd. He is considering Carolina, Michigan, Oregon, Texas, and Washington. And right now, many people believe that the lean is towards Oregon, although there was a tweet out earlier tonight from Carnell Warren, who's a guy that is committed to Carolina in this class, that said he feels good about this one. So who knows? Maybe Carolina is making a late push. Maybe some of the guys that are committed to the class are making a late push to get one of the more talented cornerbacks in the class. We will just have to wait and see. And we'll have you covered on the website, HeelToughBlog.com. Make sure that you guys go there, check out all of the latest news and opinions around Tar Heel football. You know that we are the guys that are giving it to you the entire season. When it comes to opinions, the most opinionated group out there, especially when it comes to writing. We are as opinionated as it gets. So make sure that you are over there at the website, HeelToughBlog.com, and then also make sure that you are subscribed to listen to the podcast, the longest running Tar Heel football podcast out there, at least from the fan side of things. So make sure you guys go over to the YouTube page, give us a subscription over there. Make sure that you are, checking us out wherever you listen to your podcast. If you're a listener and you're subscribed to the podcast, we would greatly appreciate that. And also make sure that you guys are going over to the social media pages, Twitter, Facebook, at Heel Tough Blog on Twitter. Make sure that you guys, when you go there, you hit the follow button, you turn on the post notifications. That would be greatly appreciated. And then when it comes to the Facebook page, all you got to do is go over there, give us a like. That'll let you know whenever we go live with a live video. Of course, we share them into a lot of the groups so that you guys can get access to those videos. So make sure that you guys are checking all of that stuff out. And again, the biggest thing is that we're trying to push right now is subscribe to that YouTube channel. Make sure that if you are someone who likes to watch these live editions of the podcast, YouTube is a great place to watch it. So make sure you are doing that for us. We would really appreciate that. So that wraps it up for this edition of the podcast. Want to thank Josh for hosting with me. Want to thank you guys for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.